Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the weekly chart of the Chinese currency, the yuan or renminbi, versus the United States dollar. Now, if you recall, I had pointed out when we had the rally that I thought that it would be very short-lived and that the trend would resume. You can see a significant downtrend in the dollar versus the Chinese currency. And of course, for fundamental reasons, I don't see any reason why the dollar should appreciate against the Chinese currency. Some have speculated that this is a play on the part of the Chinese government, but I think it's just a temporary bounce. It's not going to go anywhere. Important technical point here is this most overbought condition of the MACD. You can see it's the most overbought that it's been in 15 plus years, and now we're on the downside. So I fully expect that this 6 level of the dollar to the renminbi is going to be penetrated to the downside, not very far from now. And of course, I've pointed out in the past that I believe that the dollar is going at least to a 1-to-1 with the Chinese currency, and probably beyond that. So that's going to be a 8 down to 1 is going to be whatever that is. It's 80 to 90% depreciation in the value of the dollar since about 2005 against the Chinese currency. Now, another chart I wanted to look at here is the stock market. I wanted to look at the transports because we're starting to get to a potential place where we can have a significant correction. Now, we're talking about a bull market that has gone on for a very long time. I think I'll leave it here. We can pull up the daily, but we really want to go with the weekly here. So let's put the lines in here so we can see the trend that we already have going. And you can see this is the lesser of the trend lines. We'll put it right about here. And then the next trend line that we have here is going to be this one. And then we actually have one more which shows up on the daily. It doesn't show up here. And that's the one that we're looking at violating here. So it's that typical rounding up parabolic pattern. Now, of course, we could get a shot straight up through 10,000. That's not at all inconsistent with these types of parabolas. But if we go to the daily, we can see here that the correction we have down is just touching that line. And it doesn't take long at all once things start falling apart to get a rapid move. So you can see if we penetrate that, we could get, I got my arrow backwards. We get a breakdown there. We could easily get a breakdown of this, and then ultimately a test all the way down in here, which is a breakdown of this line finally. And that can happen. That can happen very rapidly. If we go all the way back to, well, this is the transports. It only seems to go back to 2006. So we want to go into the industrials. This is a chart a lot of people have been pulling up lately. So you can see that that type of correction can happen very rapidly. And you can see over the course, during the last financial crisis, over the course of just from well, it looks like our top was in about October 2007 down to February 2009. So really just a little over a year, you can see that it was more than cut in half. That can, and in my opinion, will happen again with this latest bubble, which I believe is actually larger than any of the previous bubbles. You can see also with the MACD, we have a rolling over effect. I think when the downside comes, it's going to be very, very dramatic. Now, I think that the reason why this is going to be so dramatic, we're going to use, well, first we want to look at CYNK. Now, if you haven't been following this, this was originally covered by Zero Hedge. And you can see here, if you remember when I pointed it out, that the market cap of this company, and it's pretty much just a shell company, no real business at all, it went above $6 billion in market cap at one point. You can see right here the price. This is the price appreciation that we had, 6 cents to $21.95. You can see that it closed today at 60 cents, so it's already lost 97% of its value. Now, we know that the stock was halted by the SEC, and during that halt, it looks like that's this period right here. You can see that it went up, and it doesn't show that price high, but it halted and opened back up and just got utterly destroyed. So what does this mean? Well, the first thing that stands out to me is that the SEC let it open up again, and then they issued a warning to investors to be vigilant about social media and fraud. Okay, but so we're halted. It's halted. We're not really told why it's halted. It's open. We're not really told why it's opened again. But you can see now it's down to $174 million in value, and it's probably going back down to that 6 cents that it was at, which is going to put it back down 1/10 of this, about $17 million. Probably keep falling from there. But what does that say about our markets? Well, it tells me that our markets are basically corrupt, fake. There's no regulation. And the regulation that we have is really just a sham, and that's the SEC, which in my opinion is just a sham. And so I wanted to take us over to this article on Zero Hedge that's about this current ruling on Yukos. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Yukos, but Yukos was a Russian oil and gas company that was pretty much seized by Putin. It was initially state oil assets that were privatized, and then they ended up taking them back. But let's read a little bit about this, and then I'm going to go dig deeper into this Yukos story. Having $50 billion of assets under potential seizure is enough to make anyone wince. However, despite a quickly worded statement on the Yukos award, Vladimir Putin seems less than anxious to find a resolution. We think we know why, and it's very concerning, as FT reports, confirming our earlier comments. The award is a landmark not just for its size, 20 times the previous record for an arbitration ruling. The tribunal also found definitively that Russia's pursuit of Yukos and its independently minded main shareholder, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, a decade ago was politically motivated. Though Russia cannot appeal against the award, Moscow said it would pursue all legal avenues for trying to get it set aside. Even if the ruling stands, shareholders face a torturous battle trying to enforce it. If Moscow refuses to pay, they must pursue Russian sovereign commercial assets in the 150 countries that are party to the so-called 1958 New York Convention on Enforcing Arbitration Awards. But perhaps this explains why Putin is not coming out swinging, as the FT concludes. One person close to Mr. Putin said the Yukos ruling was insignificant in light of the bigger geopolitical standoff over Ukraine. There is war coming in Europe, he said. Do you really think this matters? So I wanted to dig deeper into this, and we'll go to the Yukos entry in Wikipedia, read a little bit about this and the history, and then I want to look at this settlement award. From Wikipedia, OJSC Yukos Oil Company was a petroleum company in Russia which until 2003 was controlled by Russian oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky and a number of other prominent Russian businessmen. After Yukos was bankrupted, Khodorkovsky was convicted of fraud and sent to prison. So the first thing you want to notice here, that it was this Russian oligarch and prominent Russian businessmen. So one would have to ask, and we're going to look at this further when we look at this court, what does that have to do with any kind of international court? It appears to be Russians against Russians. Yukos headquarters was in Moscow. Yukos was one of the biggest and most successful Russian companies in 2000-2003, having originally acquired its assets controversially controversially from the Russian government during the privatizations of the early 90s. In 2003, following a tax reassessment, the Russian government presented Yukos with a series of tax claims that amounted to $27 billion. As Yukos assets were frozen by the government at the same time, the company was not able to pay these tax demands, and we know that it went bankrupt and was seized. Now let's look at some of the history here. The company was created on April 15th in 1993 by resolution number 354 of the Russian government following the decree 1403 of November 1992, which had directed additional companies to be set up to develop the oil and gas sector in Russia. It initially comprised the following enterprises: Western Siberian oil extraction, etc. Its first assets were acquired in controversial circumstances from the Russian government during the privatizations of the early 90s. The initial period of oligarchic privatization was characterized by bloodshed, and Yukos was certainly no exception. Alexei Pigushin, the former security chief of Yukos, has been convicted on multiple counts of murder and attempted murder, and is now under investigation along with Yukos partner Nevzlin for shooting Vladimir Petukov, mayor of Yagansk oil province and a vehement opponent of Yukos, on Khodorkovsky's birthday in 1998. In 1996, Yukos, along with many other state-owned businesses, were privatized and sold off by auction, etc., etc. So we know the history of this, that it was basically privatized, and then ultimately the Russian government under Putin took it back. Now what I wanted to look at here is this court that made this decision. This is called the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The Permanent Court of Arbitration is an international organization based in The Hague, Netherlands. Sound familiar? It was established in 1899 at the First Hague Peace Conference. The PCA encourages resolution of disputes that involve states, state entities, intergovernmental organizations, and private parties by assisting in the establishment of arbitral tribunals and facilitating the work. The PCA is different from the International Court of Justice, which is housed in the same building, the Peace Palace in The Hague. So I think you're starting to see the connections here with Ukraine, the plane shot down, The Hague, the Netherlands, Belgium, etc. And so, but let's look at some of these cases here, because this is starting to look kind of suspicious. Here's the cases we have listed. Of course, you can see it goes back to 1902. That's a Roman Catholic case against Mexico, where Mexico had to pay the U.S. Then some of these other cases here. The last cases really that are in the modern era that we have is this GML versus the Russian Federation pending. Mauritius versus the United Kingdom. If you remember, I covered that before. That's the island that the British basically took over, relocated the people, and destroyed it. And then the Philippines versus China. So these are the cases. Is this a serious entity? And one of the questions I would ask is, where are the cases against the United States? Oh, that's right, there aren't any. Where are the cases against Europe? Oh, that's right, there aren't any. So let's look at this entry from the site of, you can see it's pca-cpa.org. This is the Permanent Court of Arbitration. And here's the history. The PCA was established by the Convention for the Pacific Settlement of International Disputes. In other words, the peaceful settlement of international disputes, concluded at The Hague in 1899 during the First Hague Peace Conference. The conference was convened at the initiative of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, quote, with the object of seeking the most objective means of ensuring to all peoples the benefits of a real and lasting peace, and above all, of limiting the progressive development of existing armaments. The most concrete achievement of the conference was the establishment of the PCA, the first global mechanism for the settlement of disputes between states. So, a couple of observations. First thing, UCOS, I don't see how UCOS is a dispute between states. It seems to me pretty clearly what's happening on the world stage is that the United States and Europe are trying to isolate Russia. They're trying to find a way to seize their assets. Russia is fighting back with the BRICS, and this seems to be just a small piece of that. We've got all the key players, the United States, Europe, Belgium, The Hague, Russia, and the irony that the Tsar Nicholas II, who was overthrown, and I'm not even going to go into the machinations of the overthrow of the Tsar and the replacement of that government with the, in my opinion, the Western controlled and Western originated communist Soviet regime. You can just see that there's a lot of strange rabbit trails and things going on here. But I think the main point is that most of these international groups are really just shams. Certainly the IMF is a sham and the World Bank is a sham. And it seems that this international court here is a sham as well. We find that United States and Europe are never parties to this. We do have the one party where Britain is actually being sued under this, but of course that's pending, and we doubt that anything's ever going to come of this. So these organizations are shams, much like these markets and stocks are shams. We're talking about fraud on a massive basis, and what we're seeing is the breakdown of the pretend international government. We're really just seeing a raw struggle for power between, in my opinion, an alliance between the United States, Great Britain, and Europe, and an alliance of Russia, China, and the BRICS, and maybe perhaps Germany in between that. And so that's what's going on behind the scenes. That's what's behind these markets. And I haven't covered gold and silver because I don't really see any activity in those right now. But I do expect a lot of activity one way or the other very soon when, in my opinion, this cracks in the U.S. stock market. It appears that we're reaching another turning point, and it's going to be a very rapid downside. And then we're going to see an escalation of these other things, these international disputes going on, and the BRICS rising up, and it looks like there's going to be a lot of fireworks coming very, very soon. And we'll talk to you next time.